It's real. It's real. You know the deal. You know the deal. Come on.
Hey, it's Shanté.
And I'm Natalie, and welcome to What's the Deal, a podcast powered by the Norfus firm. At the Norfus firm, we solve people problems. We have the great pleasure of working with employers all around the world on HR and DEI strategies. Hey, Shanté.
Hey, Natalie.
I'm so excited,
Very
be
cool.
trying something new and
Yeah.
new year,
It
same
is a new
us, not
year.
us. Yeah.
I don't know. 2024 is definitely, I don't think I'm the same coming out of 24. 24
Nah.
was
Dumpster fire.
rough.
Definitely.
Happy to be here, happy to be in 25 and it's a new year, new start, so yeah, definitely
Yeah,
off to a good
we
start.
put we put some effort into intentional rest at the end of the year.
Yes, so needed. Gosh,
Yeah.
like, oof. Yeah, that 2 weeks was really, really, I don't, I don't, I don't think I would have, if it was any different, I don't think I would have made it. Because it was really,
Exactly, right,
I don't think I
exactly.
would have made
I
it.
mean, like for me, it was like I knew before we took our break that my word for 2025 had to be spaciousness. Because I mean, when I went just by doing remember I did my city list of all the places that I
Hmm.
traveled. We didn't get
Yeah.
to do our episode on that this time, but I mean, I was just always on a plane. And as much as I love to travel, it's heavy on your body,
Yeah.
and all of the things. And then we were super busy. So anyway, that 2025 is starting off with nicely with that spaciousness,
Yes.
we
Loving the
put those
pace.
boundaries in place, and I'm happy for that because there's a lot of fun stuff we're going to be doing this year.
Yeah. We need space. We need space to be able to like create some really cool things for ourselves. So I'm enjoying the pace, the way that the year is starting out. So yeah,
Yeah.
let's keep it that way.
Yeah. Root for us, y'all. We're trying to keep a good
Please.
pace this year.
Oof.
All right,
Stuff.
so 2025 is going to be quite the interesting year, and we, I'm already getting a little attitude. Well, I try not to get an attitude so soon, but it's like I feel like we're always having to kind of repeat concepts because we're in the land of DEI being weaponized, at least the term itself, and so we're seeing a lot of wishy-washiness in the
Yeah.
news these days. For part of the end of 2024, we were starting to get the headlines of companies rolling back on DEI and like
Hmm.
John Deere and Boeing and the like. And then we're hearing people doubling down. Just
Hmm.
yesterday, Apple, there's a headline about Apple wanting to sort of double down. Costco sent out, a note saying they were doubling down. And so, we're in this wishy-washiness when it comes to DEI. And today we just wanted to talk about what's all this fuss about,
Like, what's
and
really going on?
should you care about DEI in 2025?
Yeah. It's really, it's kind of like whiplash. Like
Yeah,
you're swinging your head like,
exactly.
oh my God, what's happening? Why
Exactly.
are we, what, so that thing that's happening and it's really, really frustrating. But I think where I would like to start this conversation really is around like, to that point of why is this a thing? And why are people so threatened by DEI? And I mean, we can assume things, we can speculate, but I would really like to try to figure that out. We might not be able to do it during this session, but let's talk about it. Like
Yeah,
what is
yeah,
so threatening about this term, about these concepts, about these principles that people are really they really got I'm not gonna say it, but they're upset about it.
yeah. So here's the deal. The first time I had an inkling that this was going to happen was around November or December of 2020, because we were working on that global tech company project. And
Wait, sorry, did you say 2020?
yeah,
Right when we were just starting to get into it good?
yeah,
After, oh wow, so you saw it then. Wow.
yeah, because we did that assessment project with that tech company. And remember, it was like they had employees in like 40 different countries. That's when we did like all those international focus groups, which were super cool.
Yeah.
And the CEO of that company, every time I would have a one-on-one call with him, he's like, yeah, I'm getting a lot of questions about like, what about the 50-year-old white guy?
Mm,
And I was like,
right,
oop, we got a
right,
problem. Like, we got to
right,
be thoughtful of this, right?
right.
And from when you hear the feedback or the types of things that could come up from the 50-year-old white dude, it's they're not seeing themselves in the work, right? So because DEI was always framed up in this sort of charity, anti-discrimination way, right? They are the people in power, and they didn't see themselves being represented in the benefits of whatever they thought DEI was supposed to do. Which I think
Sure.
is to a concept we'll talk about later about what is DEI, right?
Right.
You know, we talked about that when we were prepping yesterday. But the biggest thing I've seen is not seeing yourself, so thinking it's against you is what it's come across like to me.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the narrative we've heard, we've experienced, is really about pitting. There's like a pitting against, to your point, right? Like even though they don't see themselves, but then also there's language that suggests that they're the problem,
Right. Like
right?
white supremacy, right?
Yes.
Like, look, I'll never forget the first time a client said, like, somebody was a white supremacist. And I was like, whoa, like, you can't just go around calling people a white supremacist. And then we obviously had the opportunity to learn and understand conceptually what they were getting at, which certainly I understand. I mean, that's a whole nother topic for another day.
Yeah, exactly.
But I say that to say, like, I understand sort of the underpinnings of the concept of white supremacy, but I still would never call someone that because the term itself just shuts the conversation down. So something about the way DEI has been characterized shuts the conversation down for certain people because it's that
Yeah.
lack of understanding. And as we've said a million times, we as DEI professionals have to take responsibility for not making it clear enough, right? We don't have a single standard for what DEI is. We, the Norfus firm, have a standard, and we, the Norfus firm, have definitions that we work with on our clients on, but without a uniform standard, everybody gets to make it mean what they want it to mean.
Right, exactly. And I think there's so much like conflation between like the social justice and the racial justice and the DEI and the affirmative action and all these things. People kind of lose sight of exactly what we're talking about. But there is a relationship between all those things. But I think it's contextual. So it just depends on where the environment that you're in and what you're working on to really be able to apply the right principle, I guess, per se. But they are connected.
So let's use that to jump into what you brought up yesterday, which I thought was really clever in framing this up, given that there is so much misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm.
So what is DEI? What is it? A function? Is it something? Is it a process? Like what is it?
Well, I think that's what people don't really. That's the question.
Yeah, that's the $64 million, $1 million.
So, yeah.
64,000.
A lot of money.
I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah, no, but that's it. Like people don't know, and again, to your point of everyone has their own definition, their own standards. I mean, for us, if we just use just definitions, language, diversity is just the different things that make us, right? That's where do we come from? What languages do we speak? Do we have children? Do we like all those things? We got the equity, which is just around like, okay, can we do we have a level field where we all can do what we need to do? And if we can't, what barriers need to be removed for those people or those for whomever in order to be able to access opportunities, right? Like
and
some
I'll
things
just pause
require.
you right there because I think equity is what's kind of set this whole thing ablaze.
Agreed.
Right? Folks, equity is about fairness. That's it. Fairness means equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome. We're not asking that everybody gets the same outcome. We're saying set things up so that people have the opportunity to be successful, right? A set of rules that's thoughtful of. An easy example would be if we gave everybody laptops at an office, but you have someone who has a visual impairment. Just giving them a normal laptop may not allow them to be able to work in the way they need to, right? Now, that also happens to be something that might fall under the Americans with Disabilities Act, right? Because I'll have people say, well, that's just a reasonable accommodation. But that's about equity, right? The point of the accommodation is so that you're at least starting from a similar, start line. And I'm sorry to jump in here, but we've heard so much about SHRM, the largest HR trade association in the freaking world, takes E out of DEI. Why? We don't want fairness, and they've watered it down to inclusion and civility. Which is like, what the hell does that mean, right?
I mean,
and so it's just like, right, just what is so hard about talking about fairness? Like
Right.
that part, like really trips me out, like this resistance to that. Or they think diversity means Black or diversity means woman, right? Sorry.
Yeah.
You were
Nope.
still
Yep.
doing shared
We were doing language.
language.
We gotta finish it.
Pull it
So
back.
the inclusion, right? Like that's the part. So that is just, it's really about creating the container for people to feel like they can come and contribute the best
Mm-hmm.
of themselves to their work. It's not, we can't make people feel any sort of way because that's, that's the whole belonging thing, which that's a whole other conversation. But all we can do is create a space, hopefully, where people feel like they can show up well, right? And do work and feel like there's safety is relative. So it's more of a trusted space where people think that they can come in. So starting there alone, like that's what this is. And I don't know what is wrong with that. In and of itself, there's nothing wrong with those concepts, but for whatever reason, just folks have made it mean something else completely. And so I think that's where we're getting caught up, is that we're not even talking about the same thing, right?
Right. Okay. So then I think what you've just hit at is the definitions of the D and the E and the I, right? But does that mean we should have a DEI function? Like what do
Oh,
you
right. That's
then?
what we were talking about. Thanks for bringing me back. Yeah. We just got halfway there. You got to finish it. So okay. So here's the thing. Right now, it really, no one knows. People put it in different places. So Sarah, there are some organizations who put the DI. They treat it as a function. They put it within the HR department, right? And so it kind of gets lost there. I think people assume that these companies assume that because it's related to people and it's about how we engage and interact with people and how we do our work, that it should be under HR. And we're going to get into that conversation because we're not sure that's the best place for it.
Mm-hmm.
There are others and I love how you framed it yesterday. There are other organizations that keep it outside of HR and have it be its own function, because that way it has visibility and view in order to transform the organization across the organization. So it comes into more of like culture and change and all these things, which to me, when you framed it up that way, that would seem to be a better place for it. But there's also an element of this that's about the application of these principles and the practices and the how in terms of how we engage and do our work, that isn't a function. It's behavior, right? And
Right.
it's conduct, it's policies, it's practices. So I think that's where people get tripped up, is that they don't know what to do with it or where to place it.
Right. And I think what I've been talking about, gosh, for like at least 10 years, is that it has to overlay into what you do every day. When you look at what we're talking about with DEI, it is a framework through which to do things, right?
Hmm.
So it's an idea that we want to make sure everyone here is aware of the rules and understands what it takes to be successful. That's equity, right? So
Yeah.
that's just every day we want to have processes, the way we recruit, the way we onboard, the way we do professional development is fair, right?
Right.
So that's the idea of you have on the employee side of things, sure, I'm giving an employment example, but the reason why to me it's never made sense for a DEI to sit within the HR function is it short rifts the concepts in two ways. One, DEI should apply to everything you do, right? To, like, we had our episode on appropriation versus appreciation and looking at some of these marketing efforts that were just fraught with bias. But if you had sort of that DEI lens, there would have been a process by which to make sure you're vetting,
Right.
whether this marketing or this product is going to be problematic. So that's the one thing, is if you just put it in HR, it makes it seem like DEI is this little tiny concept that just applies to one segment of, business processes. And it really is applying across. Frankly, if it doesn't, how are you going to do the people processes right? If you're only thinking about DEI in this very small, scope of things, then you're really never going to do it well. And I think the other thing that makes it sort of short rift by being, stuffed into HR or stuffed into a legal department is that it leaves out the change management piece, right? So when you think about the fact that we're saying DEI is a lens, not a program, not a ERG, that's not what DEI is. DEI are concepts that help us make better business decisions. You have to have change management processes to implement. If, for example, you're going to decide before we launch any marketing product, we're going to follow XYZ steps to identify stakeholders who could be hurt by this, who's going to benefit from this, right? Like, you have to have a process by which to implement that change. And I'm sure you could go on for a few minutes here about how often we see zero change management in how we work with people.
I mean, that is the key to unlock all of this, I think, is because, well, organizations have really not great change management processes in general for any
Yeah,
new
yeah.
process or anything that they're trying to introduce. So, and then you add on the sensitivity that comes with DEI. Oh, they're definitely gonna mess it up.
Yeah,
They're gonna mess it up,
exactly.
and they do. And so that's really, if they could apply, but they don't. I don't know. Again, they don't see that connection between being able to do this well and how it does connect to change within an organization.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is why we talk about it so much with our clients of, all right, if we take a step back and we look at the definitions of DEI, and we're saying, look, these are just good business practices, right? Talent doesn't discriminate. So you want to get people with all these different experiences, backgrounds, right? Innovation, best
Right.
ideas, that type of thing. You want people to stay. You want people to think you're fair. What are the rules? You have that conversation with them. And like what we continue to try to do is close the gap of what that means to overlay it, operationalize it. And I think the more we can just get into this view of there may be tactics that can help with that overlay, like ERGs or mentoring programs. Those are tactics, right? But the overall idea here is to get to a point where it's just part of what you do so that people like us don't have jobs. Like we would
Mm-hmm.
love to work ourselves out of a job because the point of this is just that we're naturally behaving in ways that are more cognizant of each other and cognizant of what it takes for people to succeed, and understanding that success looks like something different to everybody, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's that piece that we're trying to get to. And I think this gray space that gets people all threatened is because it really has not been that well defined from the outset. So,
Mm-hmm.
back to your original question of like, why is DEI so threatening? I mean, the only thing, I don't know if you have a different view, but it brings us back to, it's like people don't get it, and then they don't see where they fit in it because they don't get it.
Right, exactly. I think it's that, and I think early on in the whole in DEI's genesis, and you can speak to this more than I can. It was very it was it. I don't know if there was a real understanding of what are we trying to accomplish here.
Right.
You explained it very well in terms of the phases and the stages. In terms of it was just diversity, and then you entered the inclusion world, and then equity came in, and I think they layered things on top of each other, not really understanding what's the point. Like, why are we trying to
Yes.
do this? And I think there's still that question, like, what is the point? What are we trying to do? Because people don't really understand that there's a reason why. If you look across, why organizations look a certain way, up and down, across, look at it. Why does it look that way? If to your point, talent doesn't discriminate, if to your point, everyone should be able to do, to be able to advance. So then how do we end up looking like this in all these organizations? Something's
Mm.
happening. And DI is supposed to
And
help
can
deal with that, and they don't want
hold
them to.
hold. Let's be clear though, because I wanna get really clear here because I can tell you it's not because of meritocracy, and I'm
It's definitely
saying that
not.
because there was a silliness at the end of last year, like they were saying for DEI didn't earn it. You were giving me the example about the women firefighters, and God bless everyone experiencing loss in Los Angeles who are leading this process, and the commentary you saw, but they're probably diversity hires. White men are not the only talented people in the US,
Guys,
people. They're
guys,
not. And if that is your premise, I don't have any way to help you.
at all.
We're so far apart. If you actually think that naturally you would end up with most Fortune 500 companies being led by white men, if you think that happened naturally, oh God help you,
But
because
only because of merit? Like, you think that merit is the reason why we end up with all these people looking like this? And that there's no
mm,
diversity? And that's the
mm,
reason? Oh,
because you're not qualified to be a CEO and I'm not. Oh, mm, no.
how does
So
that work?
I hope everybody realizes how ridiculous this idea is, because that's where if you really start and talk to people, it's like, oh, they didn't earn it. Did you? What do you mean? How do you know?
And let's not even talk about the fact that we as in people that are not in the majority have to work so much harder just to even be able to try to pretend to have some sort of kind of access. Like,
Exactly.
come on. Sorry.
So if we tie that back to the headlines, right?
Yeah.
So every other minute, it seemed last year. I mean, the list is real long of
It's
people who are
long.
saying they were rolling it back, and that this and that this is and that this. Are they really rolling it back though? Is that what it is? Is that what this is?
No.
Exactly.
No. They're playing the semantics game. They're
It's
messing
mental
around with words. It's
gymnastics.
all sorts
It's
of
mental
like
gymnastics. It's like stand up. Like stand
stand
up.
for something. Exactly. Like what is,
Yeah.
well, I mean, and people are, right? These companies are saying the ones who want to do it are doing it. The ones who don't want to do it under the name, the moniker of DEI are still doing it. Like there's still people strategies, there's still talent strategies, there's still like how are we looking at how we're developing our products and getting them to market, and they're still doing these things through that lens of a broader inclusion lens. Like how do we make sure that we're representative of whatever we're trying to be representative of? That's a part of DEI, but they're just not calling it DEI, which is really, really interesting to me.
Okay, before we get to that,
Hmm.
you found a good example with Ford.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
so if we think about the Ford example, like can you walk through sort of like what they've announced in terms of how they're shifting their DEI approach?
Yeah, so and I'm looking over if whoever's watching this is going to see me look at my notes, but yeah, so they announced back in the late summer that they were going to scale back some of their DEI policies, and so from what our research that we saw online, what they have opted to do, which was they're going to stop using quotas for minority dealerships and suppliers. They're going to stop the participation in the Human Rights Campaign Corporate Equality Index on their best places to work list, but they're shifting their focus to more mentoring, internal mentoring, sponsorship, professional development, community service, etc., which is the work, right? Like, so that's
Yeah.
that point. Okay, so you're not doing those first two, but the work that we are really champion in terms of the DEI in organizations is really that last bullet, because
Yeah.
that's the last bullet that gets to, okay, let's make it so that people can actually succeed here, and everybody can succeed here, and for whatever
Every single place that
everybody,
we do an assessment, regardless of people's race,
regardless.
ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, regardless of any of those things, the number one issue that has come up for us over the last 5 years is career advancement and
Yes,
progression.
that's it.
People do not know, again, regardless of their background, how to succeed in an organization. That gets both at equity and inclusion. So whether you want to label it that, we don't really care. We want you to work on it. We care about the substance. Also, to be clear, y'all can call it whatever you want for the Norfus firm. Whatever thing you want to define, call it that. As long as you're doing the substance, that's what we care about. We
Hmm.
care about seeing progress in the workplace,
Hmm.
regardless of the labels we slap on it. You can call it workplace culture. You can call it whatever. But the bottom line of it is that's what we care about. Now, if you look at the other two bullets,
Hmm.
that they're not going to do anymore, right? So Ford is saying we're not going to have quotas for minority dealers. We agree, right? We're not into quotas either, because at the bottom line, none of us want to feel like we got it just because you had to check a box.
No.
What we want are the systems to be in place for you to be able to identify talent from all these different backgrounds. I would hope Ford still is going to be looking for different types of dealers,
Right.
right? Because it's the same concept of having different types of employees. When you have different types of owners across your dealership network, you're going to get different ideas, different ways in which people innovate, different ways in which people sell and market to clients. And again, our thing is when you have all these diverse backgrounds, you are going to get some cool ass results. You're going to get innovation. You're going to get people really coming out there and trying to do the best for your brand.
Right.
So we wouldn't have recommended quotas either, right? So like, great.
Yeah, and to that point, not the quota, but the work. Like you
Right.
still need to broaden, just like how you look for employees. You still need to broaden your search and finding the people that you need to find. That doesn't stop. just because you're saying you're not using a quota, right? Like people need to
And I can
understand that.
speak directly to that, right? When I was a chief diversity officer, of a fast food brand, one of our big things was increasing the diversity of the ownership, because there was a lot of mismatch between how the ownership looked, between the customer base, between the population of the US. And like that required me to really have to dig down on like, where the heck can we find people? Because it's not like you just can pull a name out of a hat and people are going to sign, a purchase agreement for $70 million in restaurants. Like you don't just walk around finding folks like that. But it does require like work. Cool. And me and my my franchise partners that, worked in franchising, we always were like ideating, okay, we could try this. I know this person, we can go talk to that. That's what we're asking for, is that curiosity of like, how can we improve, the types of views and perspectives that we have here. I think the numbers were always going to be problematic. I think quotas were always going to be automatic, because I think most of our brains are wired to meet the numbers, particularly if you have compensation tied to it. But the reality is, if you focus on the number and not the how, it's not sustainable, right? So if we're saying you need 5 new Black employees in marketing, but we don't have a strong recruiting system, or we haven't really thought through how to find people, you're just going to be trying to get to a number to check that box. That's not real change or sustainable change, which is frankly why I think, people have done a bang up job of getting people in the door, right? We've gotten to some crazy recruiting things in terms of how people, but then people don't stay,
Right.
because the systems are not set up for it to carry all the way through. It's not a way of doing business. It's a way of checking a box.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and that it doesn't work. And so I really appreciate you framing it as it's not sustainable. But let's talk about the second bullet, though, the one that says about like not participating in like the human rights, HRC's quality index and best places to work. So what does that signal?
So the way I understood that piece was they're not participating in any best places to work surveys. If you take a look at these best places to work surveys, no matter who the rater is, right? There's so many of these raters organizations. So I won't single any one out, because they all have similar sort of approach. There's questionnaire. Some ask for evidence of what you're answering, some don't. And so to me, those rankings are smoke and mirrors, right? Because it's like, it doesn't really get at what's happening in the workplace, because there's someone in HR or someone that is like in the chief diversity officer role filling it out, right? So whether the long-term benefit of that is it helps make you an employer of choice or not, I don't have evidence to know one way or the other. But my personal opinion of it is it's fluff, right? So now, to me as an expert, now if I'm an employee hearing that my employer doesn't choose to participate in those, I don't know. Maybe I have a different view. What do you think?
No, and that's an interesting point that you're bringing in, because it really is it's what is the impact on the employee,
right?
When these organizations make these changes? What does it signal to them? What does it say that they prioritize? Especially if you don't follow it up with language that says what you're going to do. So I appreciate the sport example, because they are saying, well, we're going to do this, 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 and this. We're not just eliminating this, but we are doing this. Okay, cool. But for a lot of
Meta
folks,
did that. Meta did that yesterday too. Meta was very clear. Like I thought Meta's announcement that came out, I think it was yesterday, was crystal clear in that regard, right? The problem is, and it's always the problem, these media folks cannot stand to not just have a basic headline. Meta is rolling back. Well, when you read the substance of what Meta said, I don't really read that to be rolling back. I read that to be being thoughtful about the framing because of certain legal challenges. And we're still committed to this and this and this. So I just would like to make a little plug. Y'all don't just read headlines, please. Please click in to one or more articles on the same topic and read the words from the people themselves, because the people who want you to read it just going to make you think, look, nobody cares about DEI.
It's not true.
At all.
It's not true. Don't fall for it.
But back to your point about the framing. Think about, so I made a comment, and I think I made a comment, I'm going to bring it back for example, every single engagement we do, career advancement is like the number one issue folks raise. And recently, we were asked the question, well, if everybody's upset about this, if everybody doesn't know what it takes to succeed, why should we care about what underrepresented employees feel? And this is relevant to me, to this rollback. What does it mean? What doesn't it mean? It's like this whole, shell game of moving everything around and moving the ball so it makes it impossible to know what's happening, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So framing this up, to be clear, if it's not, DEI is still relevant, no matter what you call it. Again, we don't care. And a lot of these announcements are getting mangled by the media in terms of like what they mean, because when you look at the substance, they still are doing DEI.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to the point of, well, everybody's unhappy. Because again, this becomes another challenge to like DEI, right? Well, if everybody's unhappy, why do we only focus on those who are less represented in the workplace? So what's your answer to that question?
I mean, well, one thing, gosh, there's so many things swirling around in my head right now that I want to address. Let's put a pin in, we have to come back to the narrative that's going around DEI and how they're making it mean that it's like people are just put in these positions so we'll come back to that. But anyway, so what does it mean for underrepresented people? I mean, I think that it really there's kind of a employer brand thing that comes into play here. Like, do you really want your underrepresented folks going around thinking that they're not getting this because they're X, they're Black, they're women, they're trans, they're whatever it is? Do you really want people talking about your organization this way? I
And
don't
it
think
goes
so.
on social media.
And it
See,
goes on
that's the
social
thing
media.
on that piece. Like, you want people walking around saying you discriminate against everybody? Like, that's how you want to be perceived? And then again, you know what that does. Like, we know what this does. There's so many examples of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you think back to 2017 or so, when Starbucks had that incident in Philly, with the two Black men that were waiting for a friend, and the store manager called the police, and that whole kind of racial profiling issue around it. And you just take that example, because I happened to study that at the time from executive training I was doing. The amount of money that they were estimated to have lost just from the single fact that they had to shut down all the stores for one day to do training, right? So the amount of money they lost for one day to do training on how not to racially profile your customers, it's kind of like,
I'd be mad as hell.
Do
If I
you
was
really want
Starbucks senior leadership, I'd be mad as hell.
right?
You have to do
Because it's
this.
like, do you really want people thinking you discriminate? Like, that's how you. So, I mean, that's the easiest one, right? Like, a whole swath of employees thinks they don't get promoted because they're not white.
Right.
That's what you want?
You don't want that. No, you don't want that.
And you want them telling your consumers out in social media, look, this company doesn't even promote Black people or women or whatever. That's what you want? Because they're going to do it. They're doing it more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
So that one to me is like, that seems so obvious.
Yeah, right. But here we are.
Exactly.
I think another big one is like, this is just the psychological safety of it all. Like, so we spend so much time at work. Do you really want people kind of like uncertain about where they stand? Do you want them questioning things? There's a lot of stress. People are already stressed, and there's a lot of stress that comes into uncertainty in that way. And so I think it's not the load of it all, the burden of it all gets disproportionately placed on underrepresented employees when you start to peel this stuff back. So, and it kind of, again, you're still pitting people against each other, because although you're trying to balance it, because you're like, no, we want to make sure that the folks in the majority don't feel like they're being discriminated against, but now you're creating this situation for your underrepresented employees where they feel like there's an element of fear that now exists that maybe didn't exist before, because now what does this mean, right, to us? So the psychological
and
safety.
what does it mean when there's no I mean, like I just want to be clear, because I think sometimes the reason why some of these things get mangled is because people hear too much altruism in it, right? So of course, in our hearts, we believe in this work, right? As human beings, as individuals, I'm not saying anything secretive, right? Like, we believe in what we do. That said, we don't expect that every single person we encounter in their heart feels like everybody should have a fair shake. That's not the goal here. But it's the reason why we bring up, for example, the perceived bias and the fact that people may think, hey, you don't want, you intentionally discriminate, that becomes a brand problem, right?
Yeah.
So even if in your heart, you don't care about that, if you care about money and making it, you're damaging your brand reputation. You're damaging, that money making machine when people are walking around saying you discriminate, right? And if you look at the next piece of what you just said, psychological safety, why does psychological safety matter for business? Like, why does that matter? Yes, you would think altruistically in your heart, you want people to feel, safe at work. But if that's not your jam, why would you care about it from a business standpoint?
I mean, goodness, like people shrink when they don't feel safe. So how are people supposed to come in here and really do their best work, have their best ideas, like start to be creative and innovative? How do we start to like really develop the best products and everything? If I'm like, you know what? Nope, I'm gonna lean back. I'm not gonna engage. I'm not gonna lean in. I'm just gonna be here. I'm gonna do the bare minimum. It's how you get into this quiet quitting phenomena that they were all talking
Yeah.
about however many years ago, right? Like that cycle starts to happen when people just don't feel like they can really come in here and if they feel like they're being scrutinized or they feel like people are only see them as a DEI hire, so they're diminishing their talent, they're diminishing all these
Mm-hmm.
things. It's like, man, I don't want to work here. I'm out of here. And then now you got to deal with turnover. You got to replace this person, and that costs you money. So it spirals. It all spirals when you stop dealing with this.
So, um, we have a number of segments. I think this is probably a good place to pause here, but I want to leave. I want to leave this segment with this concept, and I'm going to read a quote. Words matter. Make things make sense for people. That's a big takeaway from here. What is it that you really mean? We have a lot of love for corporate communications, folks. We do a lot of communications plans, but what we are still seeing is this fluff, right? So, like, be real with people. And as you always say, stop playing in people's
Stop playing.
face. And when we come back to saying words matter, meaning define what DEI means at your place or workplace culture or whatever you want to call it, and how you are treating your employees, also stop caving to nonsense. Okay.
Please,
Like the
please.
reality is that if you, and the reason why I think we're caving to nonsense is because we aren't clear about what we're doing. So the first thing is getting clear about what you're trying to do. Again, I love how I love how we use each other's lines all the time, but your thing that always like is the most beautiful thing is, what does success look like? So when
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at your talent, what does success look like? And be confident about it, because there's so much caving to nonsense. There's this quote from the Independent Institute that they are saying these are the facts about woke culture. Wokeism's natural logic is to destroy the lives of people of both genders, all races, and, if need be, those of every age, all to leverage an otherwise unworkable ideological agenda. It's nihilist and destroys everything it touches. It tears apart foes and friends alike. It's nonsense. That is nonsense.
So just real quick, because I know we're trying to wrap it up, but the connection between the wokeism that what you just shared and the DEI, because I think there's a similar like sentiment that
Well,
is
this is what this
awesome.
becomes sort of like the
Yes.
talking points for
Mm-hmm.
why. I mean, for folks who are anti, it's all the same, right? And I bring up
Mm-hmm.
this woke thing because people are calling DEI woke. They conflate it, right?
Yes.
And
Right.
we have a whole episode on how woke has also, y'all just co-opting terms that have
Always.
long-standing definitions. Woke, first of all, what I just read, there isn't a single fact in there. That is all
Not one.
conjecture and
Not
opinion.
one.
Okay. And so the fact that these types of conversations get to take center stage because, again, they're salacious, they're sexy, and they create confusion. I don't know what they don't want us to really be focused on, because there's clearly something that this has been subterfuge for, but we won't go down conspiracy theories right now. But the reason why I'm saying all of that is these are the narratives that cause leaders to get antsy and sometimes to cave. And what I'm saying is, pick a position, be clear about what you're doing, And don't get so damn scared every time someone comes out and throws out these big things.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, there were aspects of DEI programs that touched on legal issues, right? You cannot discriminate in favor or against. So certainly, some of these things, yes, you need to be thoughtful about your approach, but we are not suggesting that you discriminate. We're not suggesting just give people stuff. What we're saying is DEI is great for business. We'll get into why that is, the business case for it in our next segment. And when you are clear about what you're trying to accomplish with your workforce, which is a narrow part of DEI, but what we typically are talking about, then you can be resilient to these sorts of attacks. But these companies haven't built any resilience because they aren't always clear about what they're doing or whether DEI is a function or an overlay or whatever the case may be is. And what we're saying now, what we're always saying is get clear about it.
Get clear. And take a stand.
Yeah. So we're excited, as you can see. I mean, we came out the blocks. And we'll be back with another segment on the business case for diversity. You know how to find us. We're on TikTok.
Instagram.
What's the deal? TikTok is... Well, you won't be able to use TikTok as this app is on your phone. So put it on your phone so you can use it after January 19th. What's the deal? And the Norfus firm on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and thenorfusfirm.com. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Here it is. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and leadership. That's the deal when you know what you're dealing with.